Okay, so what I'm going to talk about first, I'm going to go through just like three different. First, we're going to go through just a simple system, very simple. Like the simple, there's four parts to a major any real solar system. The simplest systems you can get into. I'm not at the very end. I'm going to go into a little bit of detail on like very advanced kind of things that people might ask about. But I'm going to try and keep things simple at the beginning. The simplest system we can do. Then we're going to go into a little bit of electronic theory, just how you can calculate some of this stuff. Just so when you look at your power bill, it makes sense. What's your power bill actually talking about? Then we're going to go into a little bit of solar panel types, because you're going to be like, oh, I can get this type and that type. We're going to quickly cover a few. I'll hand a few solar panels around to you guys so you can get an idea of kind of what the difference is. And then some test equipment and some generic parts and stuff like that. I think that's good enough. We can anyway. So we'll start with the basic system here. So if you look at any basic solar system, especially pretty much every solar system. So what we're going to do over here is, if you're trying to do this off-grid, okay, this is off-grid over here, this is on-grid over here, this is your house, and when I say on-grid, that means you're selling your power to the power company, okay? So a basic system for like your trailer or your house, it's always in both of these systems, they're going to start with what do you think? Where's your power going to come from? Solar panel. And I'll just put SP there, okay? The solar panel is going to send its power. Where do you? I'm not going to ask you yet, but into something called a charge controller. Charge controller. Well, let's put CC there for that. A charge controller. You're like, what is a charge controller? You're going to understand what a charge controller is right now, because this thing sends its power to battery. Good. Okay. So the charge controller, what's the purpose of this charge? If you got rid of this, the simplest system actually, you can get rid of this. You can get rid of a charge controller, but what's going to happen? You're going to overcharge your battery, or you're not going to charge your battery at the rate that it really could be charged, which could be 3 to 4 times, it could be 10 times faster with a charge controller. If you have a good charge controller, and it depends on your solar panel. If it's matched to your battery, it'll be pretty close. But if this solar panel output voltage doesn't match close, it's not close to its battery voltage, you're gonna be wasting tons of power. Yeah, we'll talk about it later. Battery. Now your battery is storing power. So let me just show you briefly what we're talking about here. This is probably the cheapest. Okay, solar panel. You guys have seen solar panels. We have some out here. I'm going to pass one around, but I'm not going to pass it around yet, because when I show you different types of solar panels, where'd they go? Oh, here they are. Okay, here's a small solar panel. It kind of represents a big one outside. It looks like a solar panel, it's got lines, and the better ones, you'll get less and less lines. Like the more expensive they are. That's somewhat true until you get to a different type of panel, which we'll talk about later. But this charge controller in between, you're going to find online cheap charge controllers like this. And you want an MPPT if you want an efficient charge controller. But let me tell you, if you are getting this one, it is not an MPPT like it says. It's actually PWM. Oopsie. So just because something says it's something, it doesn't really mean it is something. Anyway, so these, I love them. They're 60 amps, but they're not MPPT controllers, unfortunately. So MPPT stands for Maximum Power Point Tracking. What it really means is I don't know if I should. I'll cover it right now. What it means is, we need to go over something else first. Let's go over this first. But we're going to say the solar panel puts out 40 volts, okay? We're going to get into a little electrical theory here first. Power on a solar panel. Solar panels are rated in watts. how much power they put out. And what it means is if you take a solar panel, put it in the sunlight, and you line it up just perfect to the sun, the most amount of power you're going to see off of that panel is what that thing's really rated to, within 5%. So like this, let's bring out this big one. Andrew, do you mind here? Okay, so this one looks kind of big. It's not. It's kind of. This is pretty old. 17% efficient, or 15 to 17, somewhere in there. And you can see, you can get an idea on height. It's 5 feet roughly by 39 inches. Let me tuck it right there. Actually, that's a good image. I was gonna hand this one around. It probably won't make sense. This thing puts out. If you look at the back of any solar panel, actually, we should show you this. On the back of a solar panel, I wasn't planning on doing this, but now I think it's a really good idea.
How delicate are they, like moving around like that?
Oh, not too bad. I mean, you can. It's like a sheet of wood, like that, but they are stronger from the front than the back because of snow loading and hail. So you don't want to push from the back. They'll break a lot easier than they will from the front. Just did that. I wanted to show you something. So the back of his solar panel, what you're going to see here is there's usually a number. Almost there should be. If you're getting a good panel, there's reasons to get not good panels or used panels or second source panels. They're really, really, really cheap. But if you're getting a good panel, like a new one, it's always going to have a label on it. And you're going to see several things on this label. One is it's called VOC, open circuit voltage. And that's the one I want to, and then there's VMP. So there's VOC and VMP. This voltage open circuit. So if I took a multimeter right now, and I went and put this in the sun and I measured the voltage, you're going to get a voltage. I'm going to just, what does it say? It is 18, no, that's a peak power. Open circuit voltage, VOC, and they're actually saying UOC, that's kind of a European thing, 23 volts. 23 volts. But there's at VMP, it's saying it's 18.6 volts. That's just on this panel. It changes for every panel. So this panel is actually pretty good running into a battery directly. Kinda. It's going to overcharge it. But anyway, if you're running... Okay, sorry. We need to go into battery types. We're going to go into that shortly here. You only want to do this if you're doing it... the simplest systems. If you're going into this directly, that is only if you're running a lead acid battery. You know what a lead acid battery is? It's one of those things that weighs as much as half of your car. Like it's inside of here. I should there. Like it's just there. Yeah, a car battery. That's a lead acid battery. And there's a lot of dust in it. Okay. That's a lead acid battery, which you can, and you're probably going to use a deep cycle. The thing with this is, what's nice about a lead acid battery, it balances itself. It has cells in it. Was it 4 or 6 cells? 6 cells. So you have 6 cells. With a lithium battery, you have to do this balancing stuff. You guys, I don't want to get into that yet. I'm going to try and pull back to make sure we get the whole system first here. So we're going solar panel into a charge controller. This is an example of a cheap charge controller. It will protect your battery, but it will not provide maximum power that your solar panel could be doing to the battery. And then the battery, generally you want to run to something else. What would you connect to a battery? Usually an inverter. Now I'm going to show you a cheap inverter here. This is like Harbor Freight, $30, 750 watt kind of thing. I don't know. They used to be $30, probably 50 or something. But it's nice. If you want 700 watts of power, you connect these 2 terminals to your battery. Forget the rest of the system, and you can run your drill, your hair dryer, your whatever you think is important. Different people have different Needs? Anyway, so I want to tell you why this thing's so cheap. This is a modified sine wave inverter. So its output looks like this. It goes up, down, negative, and then it repeats. A true sine wave inverter looks like that. So what this means is if you have a variable speed, a lot of things have a variable speed drive on them. What they're looking for is when I'll turn on this variable control thing. It says, oh, I'm going to look for when the voltage hits there, or I'm going to look when it hits here or here. When you get these modified sine waves, it's turning on here. If you say there, it's all turning on at the same time. So you won't get this variable output. Other things, there's other charge controllers that count on this ramping. And if you get a steep rate there, it wears them out. Like some capacitors and stuff will wear out faster. Those aren't too common problems, but a real sine wave inverter, if you're going to put time and effort into this, you can get a decent, cheap sine wave inverter. I'd get a pure sine. If you're stuck, get this. But if you have the time and the effort, look into a real sine wave inverter.
There's a brand that you prefer?
A brand?
A brand?
It depends what you're going. Yeah, there's some brands that are excellent, like SunPower and Sunny Boy, but these are expensive. So, I mean, I don't mind getting them off of eBay. I love the ones off eBay because a huge one will be $700, whereas a huge one on from somebody who does a really nice one, it'll be $5,000.
Wow.
It depends, and you can get a 2,000 watt inverter for $150, $200. I don't know what your guys are going to want it for. Is this a backup or is this continuous? So that's where it's like, if you're counting on it, so your life depends on it. No, you don't want a cheap one, but you don't want the best of the world either. So EP Solar, Ever Solar, Grow Watt, those are pretty decent cheap ones.
What does VMP stand for?
Voltage at max power.
Max power.
Yeah, and so that's the volt at a real maximum power point charge controller here will keep loading this thing down harder and harder and harder, and it'll figure it out. And what it's saying is it's going to end up at 18.6 volts when you're pulling the most power off of this solar panel. But you're not, yeah, anyway, that's good enough there. Okay, so this is the cheapest, sort of the basic solar system for running your house too, if you're off-grid. This is an off-grid system. Now I'll do a quick, what's called on-grid. If you're just trying to make money off the thing, here's your solar panel. And it's going to run to something called a charge controller. Here's your solar panel, charge controller. And the charge controller is going to go, guess where? Straight to the grid. Yeah, your power. The power, yeah, like even an outlet. You can even run them straight, like your extension cord right into the house outlet. There's a lot of guys who will still do that actually. They'll just take an outlet and run it right up to the roof and put a solar panel with a little micro. These are called, these can be micro inverters, or they can be big charge controllers. You're not supposed to do that, just so you know that, but they do that. Anyway, what's nice about this, it's just that. There's no battery, right? So you're sending power to the grid. When you need power, it comes off the grid to you. This is like most solar systems, when somebody comes and calls and says, hey, we'll put in solar for $40,000 or $20,000, or we'll give you grants and it only costs you $7,000 or whatever. They're talking about this system. You're not getting, when the power goes out, what happens on this?
It goes out.
It goes out. That's why I want you to see this difference.
Well, why would they do that then? Why would they send electric to the grid? They want dependence.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Why would somebody sell to the grid?
Yeah.
Well, it's just so you
it just to lower your electric?
Your bill. Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of people, they'll get down to almost nothing, no bill, $50 or $20 a month kind of thing. There is some things, if you do want to go this route, there is some things that you can be aware of. There is a way, some of these charge controllers, it's a snazzy, so you don't have to deal with the batteries and all that stuff, but you can still have power if the sun is shining, because that's really irritating. If the grid goes out and you have a big system on your roof and the sun is shining, but there's no power and you can't do nothing, it's just maddening. Anyway, there's a lot of these charge controllers, the more expensive ones, they actually have a 120 volt output. So you can get power while the sun is shining. And only up to, I think they're about 1800 watts. So that's like, you can run anything you plug into an outlet. But that's while the sun is shining. Once the sun goes down, you're out of power again.
Goes off to the grid.
Yeah, it's got one little outlet on the thing.
Okay.
And you got to be careful, because if you ask somebody to install this stuff, they are not going to give you that, because it costs them. It's not much. It's like $150, $200 more for the inverter. I don't know, it's not much, but it's around that price more. But you have to be aware that, hey, I want this off-grid option if you're going to do that. The other thing is, you can get these systems where they do have a battery too. And here's your battery. It's just like this inverter, and then this goes to the grid. Here's your grid. So there's a whole bunch of different types of systems. It depends what you're going for. I don't want to kind of tell you what you need to go for. You have to decide what everybody's like, well, I'm concerned about this, or this is my problem. So you decide what your problem. But if somebody calls you, they're just talking about this and this. That's it. They're going to connect it to your grid, and when grid goes down, you have no power. Just be aware of that. This is a typical system. There's also there's things called microinverters. So I'm just showing this charge controller. This is really also called a microinverter. Inverter. Or an inverter. A microinverter is also in this path, but what it's doing is here's a solar panel, here's another solar panel, here's another solar panel. On the back of these solar panels, they put on this charge controller, which is called a microinverter. And then they take these outputs and they combine them all together and run it to the grid. The microinverters are an awesome idea. I love the idea. It was a great idea. The thing that you have to be concerned about with a microinverter is if you change your mind, like you're saying, and you suddenly wanted to go to battery backup, what do you have to do? Well, you got to go underneath every solar panel or wherever they're connected to. You got to whack these things off. Then you got to reconnect all these outputs together and then put in another system in between here and then charge your batteries off of that.
And when you whacking up, what is
so you got to get rid of your microinverter, because your microinverter is going to be in the way.
Okay.
The other thing is, if a microinverter breaks, you got to get up, find that panel, take the panel up, get under there, swap it out, put a new one in. I'm not a big fan of microinverters anymore. I loved them when they first came out, but options in the future, when you do a microinverter on every panel, you got to get out. You don't have any options. You got to take them out later. So if you want to go to a battery backup. The other thing is, if one of these fry, it's nice to get these things off the roof, because when they break, how do you do it? You got to go up on the roof, take the panel off. I don't know how your ceiling is going to be. That can be kind of a pain. It's just a pain to go up there. So I've become much more in favor of just put the panel up there and put as little up there as possible, and then bring this down to a building where you can swap out or into a little shack or cabinet or whatever, where you can swap the component when something fries or you get a lightning strike. Can't tell you. We got Magnum is a very good brand. I have a friend in Arizona. We've replaced his Magnum inverters 3 times in the last 8 years. The lightning hasn't even hit his place. It's not even that near it. So anyway, be ready for things to break. It doesn't. I would like to say spend more money, but I can't tell you any system where the more money does help if you're not doing it right. But anyway, I won't get into that. But even a really good system will get whacked, and you're gonna have to replace something.
What's your
Most people don't know it. They're like, there's no power. Hey, no pain, no gain. You know, it's kind of like if everything's running, do you care? No, you don't care. You run until the power goes out. That's what that's usually your key, for me at least. I mean, you got all these nice systems online and stuff like that. How many of you actually are going to go and check that every day or every week or every month? You do at first. Don't get me wrong. It's exciting and you love it. And then a month goes by and then you're checking it every month, and then a year goes by, and then within a year or two you're never looking at it until this thing fries. But when it fries, it's nice to have something that has some logging in it, so you can tell where did this thing go bad. So if you're in a system like this, I really like having a good charge controller that has a little bit of logging in it. Like you can see the past month or week or something like that. Just because that right away tells you, is your problem your battery dying, or is it your solar panels aren't putting out power? So this is a really good place to have some sort of logging in it. The cheap charge controllers are not going to have that, like this guy has no logging in the thing. A Midnight Solar will. What's the other one? Sunny Boy will. Pretty much.
Is Outback?
Yeah, Outback will. Anyway, there's some other ones out there too. EP Solar also will. Grow Watt. Those will also have some logging. I think EP Solar does. I forget about that one, but that's a cheap one online that you'll see around here. So, okay, you guys, I'm going to go into a little bit of electrical, not theory, but just calculations. I don't think this is super important here. I'll leave this up. So a 12 volt battery really is going to stop charging around 14.4 volts area.
So what happens with your 20, 30 volts that comes out of your panel?
So what it's going to do is, because it's going into, if it's a lead acid battery, this is only valid on that. Don't do this with lithium. But so it's, if we have a 20 volt solar panel coming out of here, what's going to happen is once it gets to 14.4 volts on your battery, it starts boiling. It starts heating up through the battery. The battery says, hey, that's too much voltage for me. And it just sends the extra power through the water in the battery cell. And if it's a lot, it starts heating it up and boils, and you start getting bubbling, which is normal. That's how you call it. It's called an equalizing cycle. So eventually in a battery, like this battery, there's actually six batteries. I mean, this is a good time to call. I'm going to show you something called series versus parallel here. This is, in a battery, you really have this 12 volt battery, and most batteries, depending on how high of a voltage. You're going to take a cell. We're just going to say this is one cell, and that's in this battery. There's 6 of these. This is 2 volts. Okay. When you stack these on top of each other, this is called a series connection. So you put something in series with it. So here's one in series with another and series with another. You've got 2 volts, and there's another 2 volts, and another 2 volts. How many volts do we have here total?
8.
Yeah. So we have 8 volts from here to here. If I took these 4 batteries though, and I put them beside each other, so instead of connecting them in series, I take one and I go like this, and I take another one like this, and I connect them that way. That's called parallel connection, yeah. And here, let's do one more just because I have a pen. This is called in parallel. So I have 2 volts here, I have 2 volts here, and I have 2 volts here. How many volts do I have from here to here? 2 volts. Good. Not 6? No. What's the advantage of doing this though? I mean, that's a waste. I only got 2 volts and I have all this battery.
More amperage.
More amps. So you can pull more current off of this thing. So if it's a 100 amp battery, you can pull 300 amps off of the thing. That's where, so if I do 4 batteries here, I'm going to do 4. Here's 4, right? Here's 4. Which one puts out more power? Which one?
Voltage are the same.
Which one can put out more power? Like what can you run stronger? These or these? Should be the same. Yeah, so we're gonna go into power. This is how much, again, a solar panel puts out, equals the voltage. Let's get rid of this guy here. Power is equal to voltage times the current. And they use I for current. That's just probably Italian or something. Faraday or Coulomb. I don't know, one of these guys. That's what power is usually equal to. Voltage times current. But your power bill. So, okay, so we're going to go into this. So why do some systems use 48 volts, 24 volts? What is the advantage of one of these over the other? Has nothing to do with how much power they can put out. How much current comes out of this thing? You have an idea? It's 4 times, right? So how big does this wire need to be? 4 times bigger, right? 4x bigger than this wire. That's the real. This is the key of every system, solar system, of why they go higher voltage. That's the only, and in your drills too. You know, you get a drill. Ooh, it's a 28 volt drill or 18 volt or 48 volt. Is it better or not? It's only better because the copper in there can be smaller, and therefore, what does it mean? It will be lighter. Yeah. So you can put out the same amount of power with a low voltage versus a high voltage. So don't be tricked on that. However, it will be a little cheaper generally to go higher voltage, and your copper ends up becoming smaller. That's the main. And you can't go forever. Like you can't go to 2 million volts because you can't get near the thing. Before it kills you. So usually, like 600 volts. This type of wiring here can handle 600 volts, like your extension cords kind of stuff. It's a good amount of insulation, but you don't want to be around that either. I mean, it's kind of that's what you're balancing: safety versus how much copper do you want to have. What I find it ends up driving, it depends on what you're trying. If you're trying to make a super simple system that you want to be able to get parts for, guess what voltage that's going to usually be at? 12 volts. Yeah, you're going to usually want a 12 volt battery. So you're going to just probably put them in parallel if you want to stay at 12 volts. But if you want to it depends on this inverter. Can you get a good, cheap, are you trying to do a 20,000 watt inverter? If it's a huge honking inverter, no, you're probably not even going to be able to buy a 12 volt one. You're probably have to buy a 48 volt one. Does that make sense? So if your inverter is at 48 volt, then you need to stack them in series to get 48 volts. But if it's a 12 volt inverter, you're going to have to, if you're just like, hey, it depends what you're buying really at your end. You can work yourself back. You can work yourself forward too, but usually it's better work yourself back. This thing is very flexible. The charge controllers will go to low currents and high currents and low voltages and high voltages. It'll optimize for what your battery. But generally, you want to go as high a voltage as you can handle on your inverter. The inverter is really what's your output. Work yourself back, and yeah, you can get cheap 48 volt. You never used to be able to get cheap 48 volt inverters, so that's why a lot of people are doing 12 volt inverters, because you could go to the store and pick yourself up an inverter at like Home Depot or Harbor Freight or something like that. But now online you can get 48 ones pretty darn cheap, and it does make your system a little more efficient because of your copper losses and stuff like that. And your wire, the amount of wire you need is just less or thinner. Okay, so one more calculation. Here's what power is equal to. So let me give you an example on this. This solar panel puts out, what did we say, 18 volts, 18.6 volts at maximum power, and the current is, what we're looking for on the solar panel is called IMP. That means current at maximum, at peak power or maximum power point. It's 11 amps here. Times 11 amps. What's 18.6 times 11? About 200. So what I'm going to do here is I just want to see, you guys know how many watts the solar panel is rated for? What do you think? It's rated at 205 watts. Okay, so that it worked out. Now, I want you to keep in mind, is this thing putting out 200 watts right now?
No.
Okay, what if I connect it? Why?
There's no sun.
There's no sun in here. Is it putting out some power? A little bit? It is actually putting out a little bit. It can, just a little bit of light here. It'll put out almost a watt probably right now. So just keep that in mind. It's 200 watts. I should be getting thousands and thousands of kilowatt. Oh, we didn't do one more equation here. Okay, energy. So energy is, in scientific terms, it's usually in joules. On your power bill, it is not in joules. It's in kilowatt hours. Kilowatt hours. You're like, what in the world does that relate to this solar panel? So this, first of all, we're going to do this here. This 200 watts here is actually equal to how many kilowatts? 0.2, okay? So we got 0. Okay, I didn't give you the equation first. Energy in kilowatt hours is equal to power times time. But the units they use here are funky. They're not in joules. It's kilowatts, not watts. I'm sorry, that's not very pretty, is it? Kilowatts. You have to figure out how many kilowatts it puts out. And then time. But time isn't in seconds like it is for joules. It's in what? Hours. So we're going to take a simple solar panel here. This is 2.2 watts, right? Sorry, 0.2 kilowatt hours. Kilowatts, thank you. 0.2, and you're like, how much energy will that thing put out? 0.2 kilowatts times, how much in a day will this thing put out? How many hours do you think this thing runs?
Depends on the time of year.
12, sort of. So if you look at the average, like what it can really do in a day, it's about 5 hours. If it's not tracking. If it's tracking, then you can get it almost up to 12 in the summer at just the perfect time. But if it's just sitting there, generally it's 5 hours. And it's not cloudy. So how many kilowatt hours does that thing work out to? 1 kilowatt hour. Now, how much energy is that on your bill? What's that? 1 kilowatt hour. If you used to be 13 cents now. Oh, here around here. I don't know where you live.
Ours is 7 cents.
7 cents? Oh, that's
But
good.
we pay $1 a day and a fee, a flat fee.
Oh, okay. I see. Yeah, the average. Yeah, it's like here. It's like 12 cents, 11. No, maybe 9 cents or so. Well, I'll say 10 cents just because if you go to San Diego, 36 cents. But here we're still lucky. 9, 10 cents. Lucky is a relative term, but so this thing puts out how much power in one day? Roughly in 5 hours. We just calculated this guy to put out 1 kilowatt hour, which is about 10 cents. Just to give you an idea how much 1 kilowatt hour is, this battery, which is really dirty and dusty, is about 1 kilowatt hour. Yeah, this a typical deep cycle battery is about 1 kilowatt hour of power you can get off of it. This is a 27 DC, 24 DC is a little less, probably 3/4 or so. That, to charge a battery, just keep in mind, off the grid, it costs you about 10 cents. It's not a lot. When you start looking into cars, how much, we won't get into cars, that'll take us down to, well, it's going to be like 50 to 100 of these things, depending on your car, or even more if it's a truck. And so then you're looking at, you're like, ooh, it does energy-wise for vehicle. I don't want to get into that. That'll take us down. I'll lose some of you there. I'm going to show you a couple of my favorite things. This is something else to watch out for. When you're buying solar panels, and I actually, last night I was like, wait, Andrew, you know what you should do? Some of you guys, what I like doing now is there's 3 months here of the year where it is so dark. We never have enough power. And when I say never, I mean it's like in the summertime, we need 5,000 watts. Not even 3 to 5,000 watts of solar panels to do everything. In the winter time, it's so dark. We need 50,000 watts of solar. And there's some days, there's about 5 days of those where we need around 200,000 watts of solar panels.
To run absolutely everything in your house.
To run everything, yeah. And that's so dark. But that's like 5 days of the year. So who cares about that? You use a battery for those days, okay? So you knock off. But on the average, you still need 50,000 watts of panels. That's pretty expensive. So I have gone to just buying used panels because we do this off grid. If you're on grid, you can't do this. Andrew, you might do this too. I'll let him. You can ask him later if he uses. But you can buy panels, expensive panels. You can buy cheap panels. You can buy new panels. You can buy used panels. You can buy uncertified panels. They start at per watt. So what I'm going to give you is a dollar cost per watt. A good one, the best ones out there are $2 a watt. So this panel here, 200 watts, should cost how much? Would be $400, okay? But they can be as cheap as, what's the cheapest one we saw here? Was it 20 cents a watt? Did you use that? It was about 20 cents a watt. So this could cost as much as, what's this, 200 divided by 5? $40. So you can get panels like this for $40. Actually better. No, they're 200 watt. They're 200 watters. They're a little smaller. I love those panels for just throwing over sheds and anything just to keep some rain off of it. It's as cheap as sheet metal. Just keep that in mind. It's a little bit more expensive than sheet metal, but it's like you got power off of the thing if you want. So I love those used cheap panels.
Where's a good site to buy those?
Usually I get those from Santan Solar in Arizona. Sunelect. What's that?
SANTAN.
Yeah, Santan Solar. And next year, if there's a next year. Good point. Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. If we make it through the election too, and there's anything left of our society, it would be nice to have. Well, Andrew might send out a thing to like, hey, we'll buy several pallets of panels, and you can get them at $40 a piece, and there'd probably be more like $60 a piece or something for a little bigger. But
It can cost more to ship them than buy them.
Yeah. The first pallet will be $500, but then the next pallet's $100, and it's like, and then it gets really. It's fun to have just a pallet of panels sitting there. $1,000. You're like, if you could spend $1,000 and be off grid, that's what it's going to cost you in used solar panels. And these are not that used. They're like 2 to 4 year old used panels. They're not that bad of shape. Anyway, okay, that's
How long would they normally?
25 years. They should still last. So they'll be 25 minus 2 to 4 years kind of
Because
thing.
I know there's a degradation.
Let's draw that out actually. So solar panel, this is stuff that's been out like 50 years ago too. So what's coming out today is not quite as good as the old stuff because the old stuff was super thick, and so the new stuff shouldn't last quite as long. But they would put out 200 watts. Let's say this panel, it'll put out 200 watts. In 10 years, it puts out 98% of that. Oh, is it 5 years? Anyway, it's something like what they're rated for is in 25 years. Here's 25 years. It's at 90% or 80%, depending on who rated it. But it'll still be putting out 80%. It's still working, yeah. Unless you had a hailstorm that destroyed them. But even in hail, it'll shatter these things, and they'll still work for another year or two before corrosion gets in and destroys them. Even more than that. Did you have the broken one? I sold somebody. No, I sold somebody a busted up panel. They really wanted a panel. It's like I was using it for shows and demonstrating and stuff, but they bought it for $40, $20, $30, $40 or something like that, and they're still using it till today. Who is that? Oh, he's down in Mount Vernon. Okay, yeah, and then eventually they'll do this, and then they will eventually get so hot, and they will plummet. Another thing to watch out if you're going to buy panels, I'm going to show you a couple. I'm going to let you hand this around so you can feel. This is a mini solar panel. And what you're going to notice is it looks pretty even all the way across. This is a monocrystalline cell. There's 3 types of solar panels that you can buy. This is a monocrystalline. This is the original designs, monocrystalline. Then there's a multi. Here, I'll do crystalline.
They call it multi or poly?
They'll call it multi, poly, multicrystalline, polycrystalline, and there's probably some other multiple name word. What's that called? What do you call it? Describing a. Is that a whatever it is? It was never good in English or any language skills. And then here's a monocrystalline. And then I'm going to show you. You got this. The reason I'm showing this is there's a 3rd type, and it's called a amorphous. Amorphous. OUS, I think. And then there's another name for it. Thin film. And there's another name too, I think. Thin film. You got to be aware of this one because
Are those the flexible ones?
they can be flexible. Some multi and monocrystalline are now flexible too. They're so thin that they'll flex a little bit. But remember that chart we showed here with, I'm going to go on this side here. Remember the chart we showed here with lifetime? The reason you want to be aware of this amorphous one, there's 2 reasons. There's actually 2 things to be concerned about. With time, showing this graph shows here's at 100% output power. Here, let's just say 100%. And in 25 years, they're at 90% or 80. Let's say 85% because it's somewhere between 80 and 90. I forget where they cut it off. And it probably changes on every manufacturer. What most manufacturers will do is called an accelerated life test. They'll give 10 times the sun for a short amount of time, and it's called a HALT or it's an accelerated lifetime. I forget what the H stands for. Anyway, and 85%. Now this is with that one I just passed around wherever that thing is. That's a monocrystalline. Polycrystalline. It's not that bad. It's pretty close. It'll die off slightly less. Ideally, if you have the choice, get a mono. Thin film. We'll start like this, and dead in 10 years.
Which one is that?
That is
The amorphous.
the amorphous or thin film.
Okay.
There's probably they find new names to get around people all the time. Just be aware. So I want you to see what one of those looks like. They look pretty snazzy. So here, I'd like you to. That one that passed around. Oh, I forgot about that. That one you're passing around right there, that little guy and this guy. They're both rated same power, roughly within like 10%. Is the same thing as if you just got one of these little guys. So this is a trickle charger, puts out 0.5 amp. That's 0.5 amp also. This is doing it all the time. That's only doing it when the sun's shining, obviously. But I really like those for equipment that's just like tractors and stuff that you're leaving out and it's slowly draining all the time. You can run one of those little trickle chargers or you can run a little battery. So
Like 0.5 amp, just that big?
yeah, that will put out 0.5 amp into a battery.
Oh, okay.
Is it rated to 12 volts? I didn't check that. Does that one say the voltage?
The VPM is 17.9.
Yeah,
the
good.
VOC is 22.4.
And IMP or ISC?
IPM is 0.56 amps.
Yeah, so 0.5 amp. Just over 0.5 amp. That guy will charge your battery. That's a good trickle charger solar panel size. But if you're going to multicrystalline, this one, amorphous and thin film, that guy there is roughly the same amount of power. What do you notice about it?
Bigger.
It's big. Okay, so that's the other thing to be concerned about this amorphous stuff. Efficiency-wise, okay, here's your mono crystalline. If you had to do this with I'm already in trouble. Here, this is a monocrystalline. We're just going to give you an example of size-wise. For 100 watts, Duke, you're not impressed, huh? Okay, 100 watts. 100 watts. The panel's gonna be that. Multi-crystalline. Generally, it's gonna be a little bit bigger. This is multi. What it means is it's not as efficient. So when you look at the efficiency numbers on these things, that's where these become different. And then if you use a amorphous, it's going to take this big.
All for the same power.
All for the same power. I avoid these almost all the time, just because you're going to get 10 years out of the thing. But it depends on your use case. There's some use cases where you're like, hey, I just want to throw something out there for a week or a month or something like that, and maybe you just want the cheapest thing you can get. So maybe that does work. But for anything reliability-wise and efficiency-wise, you're going to be covering twice as much roof. You're going to need twice as much roof if you're going to use a multi-crystalline panel.
Less.
Yeah, they used to be.
Oh.
Now it's hard to find these. You'll still have people come and try and sell you these. Who was it? First Solar used to be the main manufacturer of these. You'll still see them coming around, but in 10 years they're gone. Yeah, man, in Arizona, they're going through fields and fields of these things, taking them off because it's 10 years is up. They're taking off these too, but their power output's still excellent. So we're buying. Quite often we'll buy these used. Don't buy this used.
What's
Don't.
that last one you said? It's multi-vis. It says multi in the middle.
Amorphous. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
This is amorphous.
Okay.
Amorphous or thin film. Thin film is that third type. Okay, that's your third type that I would not. I'd be careful with. What happened was monocrystalline. 25 years ago, they were was $6 a watt. So this is dollars per watt. So they were up here. Now you can get monocrystalline brand new for, I think it's 50 cents is the cheapest I've ever seen. So it went down to 1/10 of what it was there. Amorphous was always cheaper, and it kind of whatever. But it's so cheap now. Like these panels, when you think you're paying $100 or whatever for that panel, brand new, it's not the solar panel that's costing you the money anymore. You got the aluminum and you got glass and you got all the other stuff. So there's only so far the technology can go before it's your hardware that has to is really where your money's going. So it's not coming from here, as you can tell. It's coming mostly from China because they have cheaper aluminum, they have cheaper glass, they have cheaper everything pretty much. The other thing that you're going to find is efficiency over time. Let me do one more snazzy graph. So 25 years ago, efficiency was, that one is 20-something years old. What was that thing? I think it's 17%. And that was pretty good then. Now, I'm done in one. Okay. Now they're getting better. Okay. How much better is this? 21%. Yeah. So you can keep waiting. I mean, a lot of people, they won't put them in. And I should be careful when I say this. There is stuff out there that's 40%. This is 21% now, right here. There's stuff out there that's 40%, but we're not talking the dollar a watt anymore. You're talking hundreds of dollars a watt. So one panel is going to cost you $10,000 to $20,000. One panel. So anyway, that's for space stuff. I can't tell you how many places in Arizona there's a solar farm, and in 4 years they're pulling it out, or 5 years, or 8 years, or whatever. They're pulling it out for whatever reason. So your house, I should show you, your house, a typical house is pulling, remember that kilowatt hour number we had? That thing puts out 1 kilowatt hour. If your bill is $150 a month, you're averaging how many kilowatt hours a day? 5, 30 days in a month, right? Yeah. So 5 kilowatt hours per day. So you'd need 5 of those panels to run a very light load in a house for day in and day out. Now that you have to keep in mind that has to be in full sun too and all that. But now that I've gone through it so many times, it's like no, designed for 3 times what you need, at least 3 times. And then if you have winter concerns, you're 5 to 10 times what you're going to use in the summertime.
To be aware of new videos like this one, be sure to subscribe to the Preparing for the Time of Trouble channel. For more free videos and downloadable audio podcasts, as well as handouts, go to www.preparingforthetimeoftrouble.com. Topic categories include recordings of live seminar presentations, country living, sustainable gardening, homestead remedies, how to be self-sufficient when the grid goes down, wild edible and medicinal plants, hydrotherapy, and end-time Bible prophecies. To take advantage of these free resources, go to preparingforthetimeoftrouble.com.